Hello, everyone. Looks like I'm the first one here. That's a first. That's never happened before. Um, so I can't do my usual, can you hear me? Because there's nobody here to answer me. Oh, there we go. 39 people already. Okay. All right. So if you can hear me, usually I wait until like 8 on the dot so that by the time the system does its thing, it's given a little more time. But I thought, you know what, I'll go in at 7:59. Maybe I shouldn't do that. So if you can type in, oh, Helen says she can hear me. Same Patrick, thank you very much. So can Alla, great. Krista, and she can see. I hope everybody can see. Deb can hear me well. Yay. Okay. Wonderful. Hi, Savannah and Pam. Joy, Ashley, all good. Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. Many people. All right. I will pull up the screen share so we can get started. And go to that. There we go. So you can now all see the screen. Excellent. Oh, everybody's saying hi. Oh, let me say she can't hear me. That would mean that's on your end. Oh, it says it's reconnecting. Yeah, it can do that, especially if your internet cuts in and out. It varies on different systems. All right, we are ready. Okay, so welcome to It's Not the Food's Fault. On our agenda tonight is why and how misinformation about food occurs, the real food gut story, how to address the true underlying causes of an imbalance in someone's system, whether it's their digestive system or their, other parts of their body because of the connection to the gut, what constitutes an effective comprehensive gut health protocol, and how to be flexible for the best interest of the client. And then we'll talk about what you can do with this information going forward. So for those who don't know me, I'm Lorene Sorrow, and I'm a holistic nutrition professional and food professional. I've been one in the holistic world for over 20 years and food even longer. I won't say how much longer, but longer. And I originally studied holistic nutrition to solve my own issues with endometriosis and arthritis. It was learning about the gut, and this is going back to 2002 to 2006. When I was really focused on solving my endometriosis issue, that I did what I could with the information we had. We didn't have a lot of information back then, but I attended a seminar where a doctor sort of put some of the pieces they had together and it made sense to me. So it kind of set me on this path. And since then, I've done a lot of research reading, and it's deepened my understanding. Of course, the gut health research has just mushroomed exponentially in the last 5 years. 6 years. It's phenomenal how many research papers are coming out right now. This led me to create the Healthy Gut Program, which I will talk about at the end of this presentation for those who are interested. So if I listened to the practitioners that I saw when I was dealing with my issues, I would have had a hysterectomy, been on prescription pain meds, been dairy-free and gluten-free, and become a vegetarian. Instead, I listened to my gut. And when I say my gut, I don't mean my literal gut. I mean my figurative gut. I mean my intuition. Something told me that this was not right for me. And I'm so grateful that I didn't listen and I sought other ideas and options to figure out how to fix me. And it was really when I focused more on my body parts. And I know we know a lot of that from, doing symptomatology or functional medicine. It made a huge difference for me, but it was the gut piece, as I said, that was the biggest thing that made the difference for me. So you can type in the chat for this question. How many of you have been taught this? If it's an underactive thyroid, then don't eat this. And you can fill in the blank with what foods you may have been told not to eat. If it's an autoimmunity, don't eat this. If it's gas and bloating, remove these foods first. So how many of you have been taught this? And then the second question is, do you believe that this is what should be standard? Does this make sense to you? So just type in the chat for me what you think. So I didn't say you had to fill in the blank. Chelsea, she said broccoli. So Catherine, well, getting lots of yeses. Catherine's saying yes and no. So I'm assuming the no is for you don't think it should be this way. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Yatmi. She's saying no. Joanne Neely says no, have not been taught this. Excellent. Some candidates are saying no. Tanya's saying yes, taught that, and no, it doesn't make sense to me. So we've got a lot of yeses have been taught that, a few no's. And a lot of people are saying that perhaps this is not the way to go. Paul says, no, that's good. Legumes, Maxine is saying, don't eat legumes, doesn't make sense because they're so good for you. That's true. They're very good for you. And Kelly's saying yes, and for sure we were taught what foods to avoid and what to eat more of. Okay, very good. All right. So there are a lot of these types of diets out, and do you think there's any proof for this approach? You don't have to answer that in the chat. Just think about that. If you've been taught this, do you think that there's proof? If you haven't been taught this, then you don't have to worry. So we're going to get into that. This is something I saw in a Facebook gut health group just about a week or so ago. So this guy, and this was a consumer layperson group, he was complaining he bloats every time he eats fruits and vegetables. And of course, people pipe in with their advice, other lay people, I might add. One person said to avoid plants because plants have toxins in them and to eat meat. And then somebody else said, look into the carnivore diet. So I try not to post in these things because you can get caught into sort of this back and forth, which I don't really care to do. But I had to post, and I just posted a comment that, look, if you can't digest fruits and vegetables, there's something going on with your gut bacteria, because when you can't digest a food, or if you bloat when you eat a food, it's because the gut is not in the condition for you to eat that specific food. And in the case of fruits and vegetables, I'm quite sure there might be some he can digest, but he wasn't being specific. So, but when you don't eat foods, especially ones that feed good bacteria, you lose a portion of that bacteria, and therefore you will have trouble digesting them. And when people do pull out things that seem to bother them, it does help them in the short term often. And this is how trends gain steam, because, we call this anecdotal evidence, and then, different people try different things, and the next thing you know, some food has a reputation for doing something that it really doesn't do at all. And the big problem I have with that is it really doesn't solve the problem, the underlying problem that the person has, because you should be able to eat a fruit or vegetable in this case, or dairy or wheat or broccoli, or whatever the case may be. You should be able to eat that food with no problem. So when you can't, that's the underlying problem, and you have to go looking elsewhere for the answer. So protocol rule number 1, you can't benefit from what you can't digest. And no one can decide what someone else can and cannot digest. There's no hard, fast rules. There's no tests that you can take other than, and again, this is about digestion. You can certainly get a test to see if you have an allergy, but that's a different story altogether. And don't get me wrong, that's a gut issue too, but it's a different gut issue. And this is important because you've got a lot of protocols out there where people are telling people to take out a whole whack of foods and then eat a whole bunch of other foods, and they have nothing to base it on. And I won't bring up IgG testing, but other than to say it's not definitive, it's not diagnostic, it is just a representation of IgG antibodies and cannot tell you if you react or not. And that's a whole, I did a whole webinar on this a couple of years ago. So the question I have is, why do we always look outside the body for a problem that's inside the body? The problem isn't the broccoli that's sitting in your refrigerator. It's the problem's inside your gut. If you have one, if you have a problem, you may not have no problem, but if you have a problem, that's where it is. I saw this in a practitioner group, Facebook group. It was a practitioner asking help of other members, and she stated her client had removed dairy, gluten, sugar, processed foods, alcohol, and caffeine, ate minimal chicken and fish, and was eating clean. She had sold her a package and wanted to know what she should do with the client since there were 3 sessions left. So she said nothing about what the client wanted. She sold a 6-week package without a plan, and I'm sure that's because she was told to do that. And she was more excited that the client had listened to her than she was that she had listened to the client. And I'm sure the reason she has this approach is this is what she was taught. And that's a little problematic for me, because if you don't have 6 sessions worth of information to go through with a client, or 6 ideas of things you can approach with the client, and to take up the session time for their health concerns, you shouldn't be selling them 6 sessions. And if it was me, and she's not saying whether the health concerns are addressed, she isn't saying what they are, she isn't even, it's all about, what else can I do to this client? And I find that very problematic too. But I've seen that more often than I can tell you. What she needs to do is think critically. So if this client has a legitimate health concern that has been stated and they're working towards, she needs to think outside the box and try to come up with why the client has an issue before she starts making decisions about what the client should do. So protocol rule number 2, you can't know what you don't know. And it isn't what, it's why. So if a person has a problem with a food or any issue they may have, I mean, we're talking about foods tonight, but I could take this logic and apply it to other health issues that people have. The question is why? Why do they have it? Because the why often determines the what. And people are puzzles, not silly putty. So they're not there for us to mold in our, any way we like and just, mush them around so they're doing what we want them to do. They are puzzles, and we're trying to help them with pieces to their puzzle. And if we can do that, we're helping them. And if a person does not have an issue with a food, you don't pull it out, because you don't know what you're tampering with, because most of the foods that are being pulled out, I'm not talking about processed junk refined foods, I'm talking about whole foods with lots of nutrients in them. Those foods are playing a role in gut health, and when you pull them out, you may be tampering with their gut health, because the minute they don't eat a specific food that feeds specific strains, there will be less of those strains, and we don't have enough knowledge to know what those strains are doing and how they may be helping the person or not. So you just don't tamper until you know it really is something that maybe they cannot utilize. So my question is, how did we evolve that we look at the food first as the cause for problems? Is it logical? I don't think so. Or is food just an easy scapegoat? I tend to think it is. There's no one to defend food. There's not a big blueberry, well, there is a blueberry board, but they don't know how to defend blueberries if blueberries were attacked. But there's not this lobbying going on behalf of the blueberry in order to protect it, or broccoli, or garlic, or onions, or whatever. And it's funny because I had a delicious soup tonight. It had potato, carrot, spinach, garlic, onions, and some sauerkraut, some raw milk cheddar, and a squirt of lime. And each and every one of those foods is on somebody's hit list somewhere. And each and every one of those foods is prebiotic. And so this is why it's so frustrating to me, because I could give you this recipe and somebody somewhere, many somewheres, are going to say, oh, you shouldn't have this, or you shouldn't have that, or why did you put this in there? Why? You got to eat the soup. It was delicious. And I'm not a big sauerkraut fan, but it was delicious. So you may be surprised to know that research indicating a specific food or group is an issue isn't conclusive. Sometimes it doesn't even exist. For example, that dairy causes inflammation, which many of us have been taught. The truth is, there are studies that show it's not inflammatory. 52 studies, most of them human studies, where they're literally feeding the humans dairy products, measuring before and after their inflammatory markers. And the only time they found an inflammatory nature to dairy is when it was an actual allergen for that person, which would be true of any food that's an allergen. And they found that with certain health issues like metabolic syndrome and heart disease and things like that, anything that falls into that category, diabetes, it was actually anti-inflammatory. So again, it's a myth that we've been taught, but it's not true. And where did it come from? It was an assumption. It was nothing more than assumption. And this assumption has been repeated over and over again. And then once you get the headline, that's what people see, and it's not really giving the true picture because you don't know where they're getting this statement from that they make about any given food. So learning to read the studies and understand what's being missed is really helpful. This is what I've learned to do. And this is what allows for critical thinking, because that allows you to sit in front of a person and discuss what they could or maybe couldn't do depending on what the client tells you. When you read about gut health, it's very tricky. One study means nothing. So it's very, very, very complex. At best, it may be a piece. Most of the time, it's a piece of a piece. Probiotics is a really good example because right now people are expecting probiotics to do a lot. There's even commercials making big claims, which I don't know how they get away with that. And it allows for too many practitioners to think that that's all that's needed, and it's not even close. It also allows others to dismiss probiotics like they have no value. So the same information is being used in two different ways. But without having access to research, you'll be confused if you keep coming across this sort of back and forth about probiotics. Probiotics cannot replace your bacteria. They're transient, they don't stay. It's your bacteria that determines how you function, what we call residential bacteria. And it's far more complex than a probiotic. It doesn't matter how many strains are in the probiotic. Your gut is so much more complex, it's not funny. However, does that mean probiotics don't help? Actually, they help a lot. And there's studies to back that up because they're studying specific strains and then testing them for specific things like inflammatory markers or depression or anxiety or blood sugar or weight loss or like you name it, they're studying it. And that's one of the biggest areas of research right now. But it has to be seen in context. Whatever they're going to determine, that probiotic, if it ends up as a product you can take, is only going to help somewhat. There's still other things to do for overall long-term well-being. So a lot of the stuff that we hear are based on observation. So a person has an issue, maybe it's gas and bloating. I'll just use that because that's the easiest one for people to relate to. And someone says remove a specific food, so they remove it and they feel less gassy and bloated. So then all of a sudden that food gets labeled as the cause. But that's not a cause, it's a correlation. And this is a common research statement. Correlation is not causation. And usually there's a confounding variable. In this case, it's gut bacteria, which produces enzymes to digest different foods. So different strains digest different foods or help digest different foods. They don't do the whole job. And when a person can't digest a food or gets gassy and bloated from a food, they don't have enough of the specific strain to digest the specific food. So I hope that makes sense. A lot of the research, they take cells from the gut lining and put them in a petri dish and expose them to something that does not reflect what's happening in the gut. This isn't accurate either because the gut has bacteria, which I just explained helps with the digestion and utilization of the food. And there's a mucus lining there present, which helps protect the intestinal wall lining. So having those cells from the lining present without these guys present is not accurate, and it really won't tell you what's going to happen. But this is where a lot of the negative info about whole foods comes from, if they claim there's studies. A lot of there's no studies. So what do you want to look for in research? Was whole food studied or an aspect of the whole food studied? So there's a big difference between eating a tomato and eating a chemical found in the tomato. And most of the studies that look at a chemical in a tomato, they're just looking at the chemical. They're not looking at the tomato itself. And what is true about a lot of foods is they have multiple chemicals and they balance each other out. So looking at one chemical by itself is never going to give you a true picture. You also can't just look at fats or carbs or gluten. None of these are going to give you a true picture of what's going on with when people digest it. And of course, if they're hard studies to do because everybody's going to be somewhat different. You want to look at how the study was conducted. So again, are they studying chemicals? Are they putting it in a petri dish? So an in vitro study is in the petri dish. An ex vivo study is when they take cells out of the, say, for example, they take cells out of the gut lining and stick it in a petri dish. Those are not valid. They can give you some insight into mechanisms, but that's about it. They're not going to say anything about what a given food or could or couldn't do. And then there's in vivo, which is going to be either to an animal or to a human. But in the case of the animal studies, they seldom feed them the food itself. They usually feed them something from the food. Usually the humans, though, they don't do that. So the human studies are obviously the best because they're actually going to feed them the food. They don't do enough of those studies, but they are the best. And then when the whole food is studied, how is it studied? Does it take into consideration the whole diet? One of the things we've learned from our ancestors is that it's about combining foods together that determine the proper way of getting the benefits from both the foods. And so history has all kinds of examples of that. There's preparation techniques. So different preparation techniques can enhance how the food is digested, how it's utilized, how the nutrients are made more bioavailable. There's a lot of information about preparation techniques. And as I mentioned, combining them with other ingredients, does that help? And does it reflect, and this is the big thing that they never discuss, does it reflect what the good bacteria might be doing to it? And so this is a question that's going to be answered in the years to come. There's some information already about this, but not enough. But this is where we're going. So rule number 3, research evolves and so does our understanding. We can't stay in one spot. You can't depend on the information from 10 years ago. Even some of the information from 5 years ago is dated now, especially when it comes to the gut. And researchers research pieces. They don't go for the whole story. And of course, part of my problem with researchers is they don't talk to each other. I wish they'd talk to each other. So you've got I'm seeing this with the current situation we have going on right now, where you have epidemiologists, you have immunologists, and then you have gut bacteria researchers. If they all talk to each other, we'd have a lot more information about what's going on right now in our current situation. But even amongst the gut researchers, they don't talk to each other. So you've got, they work on different angles, and they need to be more, trying to put the pieces together, or somebody should be doing it and talking to the researchers to help put it together, because they don't. You as a practitioner have to keep up to date. Like, there's just no getting around that, because if you keep up to date, you're going to have better information for clients and it'll solve more problems for them. And you can't assume everything you know is right. Even I think I know quite a bit, but I keep finding things out that I was taught that weren't true. Like this summer, I found out that, I was taught that eating raw nuts was better than eating roasted nuts because the roasted nuts were more prone to rancidity. And so, I don't happen to like a raw cashew. I prefer a roasted cashew. And it was always, I had this thing going on in the back of my head about, I shouldn't be roasting this cashew. But anyway, I finally said to myself, you know what? Something that tastes this good, it can't be bad. It just can't. And so I went looking. So if you don't look, you won't find it. I went looking to find out if there was some research that showed that roasted nuts, or roasted cashews in this case, were more prone to rancidity. And what I found was the exact opposite, is studies showing that the antioxidants in the cashews go up when they're roasted, protecting the fat, and therefore it is less prone to rancidity. And I'm telling you, nothing made me happier that day. That was a good news day. Because I really prefer my roasted nuts. And it also explains why the roasted cashews, assuming they're not really old, actually taste better than the raw ones, even when you roast them. So it was a very interesting piece of information. But that kind of information is out there across the board on so many different foods, it's not funny. So we live in a world where people hear things and then they repeat them, and then someone says things and then others pick it up and they run with it. And the next thing you know, it appears to be commonly believed. And once it's commonly believed, then a lot of people just assume that it's true, whether it has any foundation or not. I see it on Facebook all the time. I'm sure you do too. Some critical thinking could shine some light on the statements that are being posted, but no one bothers. Even I try to stay out of it because, as I said, you just go down and get into this, back and forth that I really don't care to do. The most common phrase I hear when I'm talking to people, including my colleagues, is, "It was the foods that healed me." So I've had many people tell me that they've seen naturopaths and doctors, and this practitioner and that practitioner, and it was only when they learned to eat well that they saw a big difference in how their body performed. And it wasn't necessarily because foods were pulled out, it was because foods were being put in. And there's a reason for that. Whole foods feed the gut. Different foods feed different strains, and diversity of strains makes us healthier. You can't just eat the same 15 foods. You've got to eat many more different foods, different varieties within each food group. Like diversity is everything. And we'll never know when people remove foods, right? They remove them, but they also put good foods in at the same time, which is truly responsible. We'll never know. This is the issue with being protocol focused and not client focused. I actually read somebody saying that there were now 17 different protocols for gut health. And I'm like, okay, that is just crazy. There's no way you would ever be able to work that out for a given person. It just wouldn't. What are you going to try them on 17 different diets? It's just not practical. And but that's the point. They're protocol focused, and we want to be more client focused. So my question is, what kind of practitioner do you want to be? The one who's client focused, or the one who follows someone who's advocating a protocol focused approach? Because the protocol focused approach is using food like it's medicine. And this is not what Hippocrates said. Hippocrates said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." In other words, stop the medicine, eat food, is what he was saying. He wasn't saying it was medicine. So a protocol approach where you have a standard protocol for a given health condition based on foods is making food like medicine, right? That's how they do medicine. You do X drugs, this surgery, that, that's the medical approach. And we're saying, no, we're individuals. We need to focus on the client and figure out what's best for the client. So I got two examples of food stories here for you. One is the peanut story. So I recently read an article by someone who said she wouldn't eat peanuts even though she loved them. And this was a practitioner, just for the record. And the reason was aflatoxins. So if you know anything about aflatoxins, they are the chemicals produced by mold spores. And our bodies don't like them. They have been linked to food allergies. So most people, especially when they're anaphylactic, it's the aflatoxins they're reacting to. And they're possible carcinogens. It exists in many foods, not just the peanut. But molds in soil where peanuts and other crops are grown are one of the reasons why a food might be more prone to aflatoxins. And peanuts sprayed with antifungal chemicals don't build their own antifungal chemicals, and therefore have less of an ability to fight off mold. And therefore, if you can't fight off the mold, there'll be more aflatoxins. Now, aflatoxin levels are measured. Governments have regulations as to how much can be present, and we can handle some aflatoxins. We don't, unless we have an anaphylactic reaction to something, but most of us can handle some aflatoxin exposure. They've also found that healthy soils with organisms such as Bacillus subtilis decrease aflatoxins in the soil. Roasting decreases aflatoxins. And like the cashew, the antioxidants in the peanut go up when you roast them too and are less prone to rancidity. And then Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, which is a common probiotic, has been studied and decreases aflatoxins by binding to it to restrict its absorption from the intestines into the body. If it doesn't absorb into the body, there's not going to be a reaction or less of a reaction. So, and again, this is just one strain they've studied, but if you can find one lactobacillus that does it, there's probably more, and probably we have them in our gut if we have a healthy gut. So what does this mean? If we're looking for a reason why the peanut may be problematic for some people, we can look at the poor soil management of modern agriculture. So that's both the chemical treatments that go into modern agriculture and how we maintain the health of the soil. Poor handling of the harvested product. So, you know, the peanut is harvested months before it actually makes it into peanut butter. Poor gut health. And when we look at the last 50 years, these are 3 areas where things have deteriorated. So the gut health has gotten worse, the agricultural standards have gotten worse, the harvest time has gotten worse, and you know, how we handle food and how old it is when we finally get it. All of these things have changed. Now, is this the peanut's fault? No, the peanut is still the peanut. It hasn't done anything. If anything, we've been mean to the peanut because we aren't treating it nicely by raising it in good soils, and we spray it with chemicals, and then we let it sit around for a while, and then we expect it to, you know, not have mold spores and aflatoxins. And that is, to me, frustrating because it's a great food. It's a legume. Somebody mentioned that in the chat. It's a legume. And it's one of the legumes that people likes. So a lot of people don't like legumes, but almost everybody likes a peanut, at least, especially children. So here we are, we're blaming the poor old peanut, when meanwhile, it's not the peanut, it's what we've done to the peanut. So if we buy organic peanut, so we fix the gut, we can eat the peanut. Now, obviously, if people have an allergy, they may have to not do that. But for the rest of the world, and to prevent further peanut allergies, this is what we should really try to do. Another story is about dear gluten, okay? So this is what's being said, not by me, but in general. We can't digest it. Some call it a toxin. Some say it's because it's a hybrid. It only breaks down into smaller protein molecules, gliadin and glutenin, not single aminos. So we're all taught, I know, that the end product of digestion of protein is single aminos that get absorbed into the bloodstream, and that's when we utilize them. That gliadin can lock onto the CXCR3 receptor and trigger zonulin. Zonulin opens the gap junctions, and partial molecules can enter into the bloodstream, triggering inflammation. Now, you've all heard some version of that story. They also say, this is a little more recently, that we don't have the protease enzymes that can break down gluten, which is why we don't get the single amino acids. And they say this is for everyone, not just those with celiacs. This has caused some to say that no one should eat gluten, and others to say, usually the researchers who actually do the research, this lack of digestion is not a problem for those who do not have an allergy to wheat, have a sensitivity, or are celiac, which of course is the majority of people. So here's what's really happening. They jump the gun a bit here. So again, it goes back to what I said before, you can't know what you don't know. So they can't know what's not known. Now, it's true we don't have the protease enzymes to digest gluten down to single amino acids. So remember, protease enzymes, from our perspective, are from the pancreas, and they occur in the small intestines. But we do digest it, it turns out. The question is where and how. And the role of the bacteria was not even considered when the researchers were doing this research. A lot of this was ex vivo, and they're doing it in petri dishes. So what they've found, and when I say found, this is fairly recent, I read about it in 2018, is we have proteolytic enzymes in our mouth. Now, that is not something I was taught. I was taught we have amylase, which we do, but nobody told me we have also protease, but apparently we do. And gluten and protein digestion begins there, and this may be true for other types of protein, but again, they don't study it because they only study gluten because of celiacs, and they haven't studied a lot of other protein molecules to this degree. Now, celiacs, it turns out, have different enzymes of these proteolytic enzymes in the mouth. They're different than the ones that healthy controls have, and they are more elevated. So they have more of them, and they are slightly different. And researchers are not sure what this means for celiacs and the development of the disease. New research has also discovered that gliadin is supposed to make it intact in the colon. So they were saying it didn't break down into single aminos. Well, that is true in the small intestines, but apparently it's not supposed to. And it's completely degraded by specific strains in the colon. This is really interesting because, again, we were taught everything is broken down into its smallest constituent parts by the time it enters into the colon if you've got good digestion. But apparently it's not true. And while we don't know if there's partial protein molecules from other foods that are doing the same thing, I highly suspect there are, because when the gliadin is completely broken down into amino acids in the colon, it produces nitrogen as part of the waste material of the breakdown. And nitrogen seeds other strains in the colon to degrade fiber and resistant starch and produce beneficial metabolites like butyrate. So in other words, the nitrogen is part of, and I've read that about protein and the benefits of protein for gut health, that the nitrogen is very good for helping gut bacteria do what it needs to do. And so this is what they have found with regards to gliadin. Now, celiacs may be degrading the gluten too fast because of extra protease enzymes in the mouth, and therefore it's getting, it's supposed to be at the gliadin stage by the time it gets to the end of the small intestines, because you do have some colon bacteria in the ileum of the colon at the very end before it goes, ileum of the small intestines before it goes into the colon. Celiacs have dysbiosis, so they already have a degraded mucus lining. This will allow for partial protein molecules to access the lining and link onto the receptors and trigger reactions. But the gluten didn't cause this. This is about the person, and in this case, celiacs. So should we be making an assumption about gluten based on celiacs? Doesn't make sense to me. And as I said, other partial protein molecules may do the same. We don't know. So we can't be making an assumption about gluten unless we've tested all proteins and see what they do too. And that has not happened. So this means that gluten and the polysaccharides and fiber in wheat or grains that contain the other grains help promote many different strains of beneficial bacteria. And when we completely pull out foods that feed gut bacteria, we mess with the client's gut bacteria balance. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier, where we have to be very, very careful. And there has been studies done where they took healthy people and removed gluten, and their immune health, some of the factors for their immune health that they measured went down. Because this was a food that they could digest and they were utilizing it well, and your gut bacteria is tied to your immune function like nobody's business. So we have to be very careful. And if the client gets better in the short term and then relapses, the gut they have now has been altered by removing the foods. So again, we want to go carefully when we think about this. Now, when it comes to nutrients or supplements, there's a lot of interactions with bacteria, and this is a new area of research. Research shows benefit, when it shows benefit of a given supplement or nutrient, it's often because of the way it interacts with the bacteria, and it's the bacteria causing the action. They've found this with some drugs, like metformin, for example, and they didn't know this. They've been recommending this for years, but they didn't actually know this, that metformin stimulates a specific strain of bacteria in the gut, which then in turn improves the insulin sensitivity. But it's the specific bacteria that is working with the nutrient. So it's not all bacteria, it's specific bacteria. And that's the key. So for example, lavender inhibits bad bacteria and promotes good bacteria, increases Treg cells. Treg cells are essential for managing and regulating inflammation and preventing reactions. A sweet orange promotes bifidobacteria, inhibits bad bacteria, and aided weight loss in rats. Turmeric alters gut bacteria, and the bacteria then does the corrective action associated with turmeric. However, based on a human study, it found it only had a productive response in some participants and not all. So again, it's about what bacteria the person has determines how effective the supplement will be. What does this mean? So it depends on the person, right? And we have to be focused on the fact that maybe some of the supplements we recommend may not work for all people. Therefore, we have to have more ideas to suggest for them. Okay, now new research. They've been basing what a healthy microbiome is on the Western diet, but they don't now think that maybe this is the microbiome we were supposed to have, because we're not the people we once were. Anyway, the question is that this is what they're trying to answer. So they're looking at more indigenous groups who live as close to maybe how they might have lived in the past. And what they're finding is they have way more diversity in their diet and way more diversity of strains, both good and bad, and much lower incidence of health issues, both issues that are common to the Western world and even infectious conditions as well. They're also changing sort of how they're looking at the microbes. So normally they use DNA to just look at microbes, and it really doesn't give them a visual representation. It's kind of like trying to picture a forest from a pile of wood chips. So they did some studies where they took cross-section of fecal matter from 2 sets of mice, one fed a refined diet, the other a fiber-rich diet. And it showed that similar microbes swarmed together in a fiber-fed sample. And it was kind of like schools of fish. They kind of undulated back and forth through the intestinal system. The refined-fed animals, the microbes were evenly spaced. So what this means is that these bacteria are communicating and working together. The mucus lining was twice as thick in the fiber-fed mice and in compared to the refined diet mice. Now, pathogens can't get at the lining or into the bloodstream if the mucus lining is thick. So that's a very important piece of information. Fiber-degrading bacteria promotes the growth of other microbes as well. And different foods, as I keep saying, promote different strains. You can't just have one type of fiber or one type of prebiotic, because there's a lot of people selling prebiotics as supplements. A wide range is needed to support a healthy gut. And you can't have diversity by removing the prebiotic foods. So dairy, wheat, grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds all contribute to diversity. One of the diets that's out there right now is the FODMAPs. Those are all prebiotic foods that they're having you remove for IBS. IBS is it is a dysbiosis condition, but it is so linked to stress and other factors. The idea that you would remove all these prebiotic foods does not make any sense. And within this group, you need variety. And our goal should be to put in what they don't eat and gradually lower what they do eat too much of. And it's a much easier way to get some balance going. Sensitivities, as I've mentioned, is a sign they don't have enough of the bacteria to degrade or metabolize the chemicals in the food. They may not have any of the strains for specific foods. They might be instinct in them. If that's the case, they're not getting the food back. But those who have some, just not enough, have a chance with a good protocol. And removing the food should not be the first step. So restrictive protocols where multiple foods are removed are even more dangerous. If even one of the foods are a sensitivity, the person will feel better. And then without a good reentry plan for all the other foods to show that those aren't a problem, the client will be afraid of all the removed foods. And generally, all the removed foods are good gut foods. So diets that remove complete food groups like grains or legumes or something like that are even worse, because they're going to have the problem forever if they don't feed gut bacteria. The irony is that these foods that they're picking on are all prebiotic. They're being blamed for damaging the gut, and they actually feed the bacteria that can protect the gut. So we need to increase the consumption of whole prebiotic foods in the diet. And as I mentioned, removing them can be dangerous. So in terms of getting better results, don't start with food removal, end with it if necessary. So do everything else food first. Look at how they're chewing, what are their eating habits, enzymes, probiotics. Start with some simple introduction of foods might be able to help with digestion. You look at whatever you can do first, and you go step by step, so it can be very, very methodical. And you explain to the client so they understand the process and they know why you're doing this and why this might be advantageous to them. And that's the way they'll stay the course, because they know what the goal is. You need to understand where their gut is at and possibly why. And you want to center the protocol, which again is going to be customized to them, around the gut. And this will always help the client. Remember, all health conditions are being connected to the gut. Every single one of them. So our role should be to have a neutral client-focused plan. And we shouldn't be pushing any one style of eating, not high fat or sugar or protein. None of those are good for the gut. Let the client define what's needed based on how their body reacts. We need to teach them to listen to their body, something that we have lost as human beings. We're not very in touch with ourselves. And we need to get past their emotional beliefs, because this is the thing I see the most often is people are now afraid. They don't know what to eat. And so what they need is sort of you to lay out a map for them in order to change behavior. In other words, you're going to outline potential directions to go, options for them, and then they choose. And if they choose, they're going to be more observant and they're going to be more invested in the outcome. Gut health work is very complicated and takes time, and it's essential for the recovery for all health conditions. So you really do want to do this always. Each client is unique. Our guts are like fingerprints. There's no two the same. You want to get their story first so you can figure out why. And you want to do your homework as best you can. So you need to know all about the gut and its connection to various various health conditions, so you can make the case to the client as to why they should be focusing on the gut when they have diabetes or heart disease or depression or whatever the condition may be. And then you make decisions together that are best for the client. So when approaching a client's protocol, do you know what to do to create a unique food protocol for them? Do you understand the supplements that aid the process of healing the gut and why? Do you know how to repair the mucus lining and the intestinal lining? And can you think outside the box, or are you married to what you've been taught no matter what? So if you can answer those questions in the affirmative, then that's really good. If you don't, then this might be a reason to obtain more information about the gut. I understand if you're wondering, how do I know what's right for the client? You don't. That's not your job. Your job is to present options and help the client figure out what works for them. Even the doctors do this, believe it or not. They may be making suggestions, they may be writing their prescriptions, but they don't know for sure that this is right for you, and only you reporting back to the doctor will clarify if it is or it isn't. Health is not easy. We really have messed things up. We really don't have the best playing fields that we should have for us to live our best lives. So if you feel overwhelmed by the process of taking on this responsibility for someone's gut health, you're not alone. It can be very intimidating because it isn't black and white, and this is just the way it is. And when it comes to the new gut health info, it is overwhelming. It's fascinating, but it's overwhelming. And this is why I developed the Healthy Gut program. Because I was reading all this research, I can see how helpful it would be, but there was no way to sort of give it to everyone in a sort of a comprehensive way to sort of catch up with what's already been learned and then be able to take that to adapt all the new information that's coming out. So it's a very unique program, and it's based on the info that's current today. It allows you to take what you know and do more with it for clients, and they'll have better results. And I'll show you how to create this map that I mentioned for the client step by step. And again, you're not giving them some canned protocol, you're giving them options that they choose. This is what becomes their protocol. There's real conversation this will allow between you and the client. There's no agenda. You're not, pre-thinking or assuming, and they're not pre-thinking and assuming. You're just going to work it all out together. And this is what will help the client. There's many options, and that's the good news, and all must be available to us. What's silly? Many of my colleagues don't want to remove food and don't believe it's always necessary, but they weren't taught any other approach for a client. They weren't given the key knowledge as to what they should be doing or enough ammunition. And an in-depth gut health information is the answer. If you don't know why, I can tell you, this is what I talk about all the time. And again, don't get me wrong, people forget stuff, and you need to hear it more than once. And even I need to hear it more than once, believe it or not, because it is so in depth. But the proof is in the pudding. Until you try something new, you can't know that it works. And in order to counter what you may think to be true, you need to be exposed to alternative information. You also need a framework that allows critical thinking so you can assess information when you hear it going forward. And that's the biggest and best thing you can do for yourself. You see something that's come out as new research, or you read an article, or a client asks you about something and it stumps you, and you're going, okay, where can I go? What can I do to get sort of a counterpoint in order to assess this information? And then you can now discuss it with the client or whomever you need to discuss it with to sort of, help them out. And this is the only way for the best interest of the client. And they'll love you for that, by the way. I've had many people who, I could write a book about people who I told the simple suggestion, they had digestive issues with wheat. And I said, would you just try the sourdough, please? Just try it. And they were afraid, but they did it. And now they have this wonderful bread that they love that goes beyond. So sourdough isn't just about digestibility. It actually has other health benefits that regular bread doesn't have. And now they've got this as part of their repertoire of foods they can eat. Now, it doesn't work for everyone. Okay? So I'm not going to say sourdough is the answer for everyone, but it works for a lot of people, and they're delighted. And every time you can deliver something like that to a client, just think how grateful they will be. Your reputation is not based on agreeing with others or maintaining the status quo. It's based on you doing right by the client and helping them discover their best solutions. And you can only do this by having an open mind, thinking critically, and listening to the client. And to do this, you need good knowledge that goes beyond what the status quo knows and designing the protocol to fit the client. Because I can tell you right now, after being in this industry for many years, the status quo is always behind the times. The status quo is never up to date on what's really going on with what we know now about how we work and what helps us and what doesn't help us. So if you don't know all the answers, you should at least be able to ask all the questions. And that's one thing I always say. I know I don't have all the answers, but I do know all the questions. I have questions that are waiting to be answered. And I look for the research to answer those questions ongoing, because I know what I need to know. I know what they should be able to tell me at some point, even though I know they can't necessarily tell me right this minute. All right, so I mentioned I would tell you about the Healthy Gut program. I'll do that quickly, and then I'll take your questions. So there's two versions of the Healthy Gut. One is the Healthy Gut Foundation program. It's 5 modules, has a complete review of the digestive intestinal function. It goes deeper than probably what you were taught in school. And we talk about the gut bacteria, and you'll learn all about that and strains and things like that. It also talks about how the gut is connected to other systems in the body, like the liver and the kidneys and the brain and the breast and it's amazing what they've found out now. It includes mothers and babies, so you have aspects of what women should be doing while they're pregnant and when the baby is born. The role of supplements and food, and a step-by-step protocol for each. And again, when I say that, that's the map. It's not a cut in stone protocol. It's how you lay out the protocol for the individual client. And it includes other factors for gut issues, gut motility, inflammation, mucus lining, and more. There's a symptomatology and client questionnaire that is easy to use. It doesn't have scores, and it's really makes it a lot easier for the client to fill out. Plus, I also did a client gut health history form. You might not use it all the time, but sometimes you're going to have questions, and the client may not be able to answer them or off the top of their head, but filling out this form, which is quite in-depth, could trigger information coming out. There's an updated dysbiosis, candidiasis protocol, SIBO protocol, and leaky gut protocol. There's recipes and menu plans. There's a customizable food chart specific for gut foods and a menu plan designer. These two tools are really powerful because it helps the client actually pick where they need to go. It's very visual for them. It's experiential for them, which actually helps people stay on their protocols. Good bacteria strains chart for different conditions. We have an amazing Facebook group. of practitioners that they're so great now. Like I used to have to go in and answer every single person who posted. And now sometimes I don't get into the Facebook group for a day and I go in and the group has already answered the questions. It's just an amazing group. And you get videos, PDFs of the videos, and there's research references for all the things that are taught in the program. Bonus 1 is you're going to get a 2-webinar series called The Healing Effect of the Practitioner. And basically what it does is talk about how we as practitioners bring elements of healing to the person by the atmosphere we create. And there's science to back this up. And it's important that we understand that we're part of the story too. Bonus 2 is there's a business module for those who want to figure out how to use the materials for their business. If you've had business coaching, there might not be that much in this module that would be new to you, but if you haven't had any, this will give you some ideas. Then there's bonus 3, which is the Amplify the Experience program, or ATE. It's the bi-monthly live support meetings that we have where you can ask any questions about business, about your clients, about yourself, about the program. It doesn't matter, they're live and they're twice a month. And there's also going to be, for bonus number 4, a module review for every 2 modules. So this is live where I go over the essence of the 2 modules that we're reviewing. And it's really helpful for those who have been following along on the program as a review. It's really helpful for people who've not started yet because they're going to get some of the information in the program before they start. And if you take the payment plan, then you get a module released every 2 weeks. And you can follow the schedule, or you can do it at your own pace. If you pay all at once, you can get the whole, all the modules released. But again, it's all at your own pace, and you can do what you like. It also includes a complete done-for-you program, and this is something you can customize as your own. It has 7 different lead magnets, 3 email sales funnels, and a sales page, PowerPoints to help you run your own program live and online, handouts for even more added benefits for your clients. Clients love to get things that are tangible. Blog posts and extra recipes. There's not that many, but it's just some to help save you some time. Candidiasis dysbiosis questionnaire, which is really helpful. There are 5 21-day menu plans, regular, paleo, vegan, FODMAPs, and ketogenic. I'm not recommending any of these in particular, but you're going to get clients who are on these diets and they're coming to you and they may not be willing to change, at least in the beginning. These are already optimized for gut health. So therefore, you know where to start with them. And I don't use menu plans like here, follow the menu plan. I use them where you give them to the client and you say, okay, here's some ideas for breakfast. Pick some, right? You use it to help the client make the choices. There's over 130 different delicious recipes, and it's just a brand new way to give more tools and value to your clients. So this program allows you to be a gut specialist, gives you a foundation for all your recommendations. Excuse me, it'll help you learn to recognize misinformation, and you won't waste your clients' time. And you'll have happy, more satisfied clients because of the tools you gave them. This is just something that members are saying. I've got a lot of positive feedback. Kayla here has at the time was stating that she has yet to remove foods from people's lives, which is made for happy clients. And she just loves the approach that was taught because it gave her the confidence to do this. Kathy has found that this has had a profound effect on the way she deals with the clients in her practice. It's sort of changed how she did her practice and how she went through working with the clients. And this is the common kind of response that I'm getting from the people who take the Healthy Gut program. Now, this early bird special that's on right now ends February 18th. The program is $697 or 4 easy pays of $197. And you can start as soon as you register with Module 1, but as I said, you can do it at your own pace. Now, there's a second program. It's the full Healthy Gut program. So it's all of the things you get in the foundation, plus 5 more modules. And this is where we get into all the connections with other health conditions and lifestyle issues and things like that. So you can see the list there: heart disease, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, osteoporosis, Crohn's, you know, you can see it's just tons and tons of stuff there. And there's more. We keep finding more connections. I was just looking up one with gout today, because apparently one of my aunts has gout. Interestingly enough, she's a celiac and she has rheumatoid arthritis, which tells me she already had a major gut issue. But anyway, and I found the gut connection. Plus, we talk about the connection to stress, depression, anxiety, exercise, sleep, the thyroid, estrogen dominance, cancer. Just added information on hormones and EMFs and the endocannabinoid system and the gut. So this is all connected to the gut. And then we talk about how to research the gut, and there's case studies, my case studies, not your case studies, my case studies, and counseling strategies. All that all comes in the full program. And the cost for that is $11.77, or for easy pays of $297. Or as I said, you can do the Healthy Gut Foundation program, $697, or for easy pays of $197. And it'll start as soon as you register. And I have one more offer. And I thought about this because what's been happening lately, because of the Done For You that's included, I'm getting and have been getting a lot of questions about how to use the Done For You specifically for people's specific aspects of their business, because this program, the Done For You, can be adapted as you see fit. So for the first 10 people to register, I'm offering a half-hour session with me, and it'll be to how to optimize the program materials, whether it's the educational materials or the Done For You materials for your business. And you can access this anytime. So you could do it now, you could do it in 6 months from now. Whoever signs up, the first 10 people, I'll send them an email so they know that they have qualified, and they can just contact me at any time. I'll have the names and I'll be ready. All right, so thank you very much. I'm going to stop the share and see if you have any questions. Somebody's saying whatever. Okay, it's supposed to be is not causation. So I don't know what somebody's saying. Lisa's saying somebody's not holistic. I don't know what that is. But I'm glad you all like the idea about the cashews. Won't roasting increase free radicals? No, that's the thing I learned, is that it increases the antioxidants. Antioxidants are the counter to free radicals. So no, it protects. And Carol's going to go roast some. Excellent. Would you share the notes and slides after this webinar? Yes, I will. I'll send it out in the replay tomorrow morning. Protocol, low FODMAP. I know some of you had this on private, so some of you can't see this. Low FODMAP has been shown to support SIBO. Can you share a high-level overview of why you don't recommend this and other lack of prebiotics? It's because, again, the only evidence that it supports SIBO or any other whatever is that you removed something that may be problematic for one food. It could be one food. And in the meantime, you've taken out all these prebiotics that were very, very helpful. And it's just a short-term thinking, and there's no scientific proof. There's no research proof. It's just an anecdotal representation that somebody is promoting, right? Mel says, will this program help? Oh, wait, sorry, I was supposed to put in the, see, I don't do my job very well. I just typed into the chat the link for the sales page for anyone who wants it. Will this program help educate a practitioner who's working with someone who has Crohn's? Yes, Crohn's is one of the areas that huge difference when you work on the good gut health information, because that's right in the intestines, and it needs to be healed, but it can be healed. So people are thanking me. Thank you. Janet says, I bought the health, was wondering if we have access to all the new information. I think you said we do. Yes, Janet, when you log in, whatever I've updated is there and always will be. Alice says, thank you. All right, that's all it should not correlation. Yes, right, we talked about that. Thank you so much for the information. Lots of great up-to-date information. Okay, so any other questions? If you don't have any, I managed to do that in an hour. I'm amazed. Sometimes these things don't go as planned, but this one seems to have. And yes, everybody's saying thank you. All right. Well, I'm hoping I've inspired you to think outside the box. And Mona's saying she loves my webinars. Thank you, Mona. I think we are so right to be the food champions more than any other group of practitioners because we know more about different foods and we just have to give our clients the best information. Janet wants to know, how is gut related to cancer? So it's complicated, but cancer is an immune system failure disease with factors, okay? And the gut regulates proper immune function. That's the short-term answer. The gut bacteria and in the cases of probiotics, they've actually been studied to help people when they have cancer do better with chemo and recover faster too. So this is, again, something that we have an ability to be involved with. We're not primary practitioners on cancer, but we can be support practitioners. And so there's a role for us to play. Consrenza, there, I hope I said that right. Still a student in Vancouver. Maybe this course will be useful for you in the future. I hope so. Thank you, Helen. Thank you for saying it's great information. All right. Okay. Is cancer a topic that will be covered in the program? Yes, there is a video where I talk about the cancer research with regard to the probiotics, which is where the main one has been, and how to support through that. Diane says, for prebiotic foods like garlic and onions, does it matter if they're raw or cooked? Interesting, because raw garlic left for 20 minutes before you cook it has higher antioxidants than when you cook the garlic right away after you peel it. So there is something that is of value with the raw garlic, but you can also cook it and get more value than normal by leaving it raw for about 20 minutes at room temperature. Maxine says, I'm not a fan of restrictive diets and it creates a lot of fear and boring eating. That is right. It does. And this is the message we need to get out. It's healthy food is not boring. This is the food with all the flavor, the herbs, the spices, the different varieties. This is the good food. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. And if you have any questions, you can email me. I will be sending out the replay. And hopefully I'll see some of you in the Healthy Gut program and we can continue this conversation. All right, everyone. Have a good night. Whoops. Sorry. I was about to, do I want to end this event? No, I don't. Sorry. I had already clicked the button, but I stopped it. Jill says, you have a testimonial on your website from someone who had celiac and can now eat wheat. How common is that? How long does it take to heal the gut in a case like that? Years. It took her years. But because she knew that this is where she needed to go, she just kept at it. And then as I had more information for her of things to try for gut lining and mucus lining and building bacteria, she also had tons of other food sensitivities and she got those foods back too. So yes. And I'm not going to say that's an easy one. That's probably one of the most difficult. But it's possible. It's theoretically possible. And there are studies with celiacs where they've done different things. Like, for example, they've taken sourdough and then when they go to make the sourdough starter and when they go to make the bread, they put in like millet flour instead. So they're getting the degraded sourdough starter and then the fresh flour that is usually added to make bread. It's not wheat flour, it's millet or some other gluten-free, and celiacs could tolerate it. So there's more to that story. Like I said, there's always a lot of research on celiacs. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good night. This time I really am pushing the button.